Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
Let's turn to America's 250th birthday. It's not a bicentennial, is it? Well, see, this is why we bring in smart guys like
it's
Professor
a really hard word.
Matthew Spalding. He's the Vice President for Washington Operations and Dean of the Van Andel Graduate School of Government at Hillsdale College, right here in your nation's capital. His new book is The Making of the American Mind, the story of our Declaration of Independence. And what's it? It's not a sesquicentennial. It's not a bicentennial. It's not a centennial. What is it, Dr. Spalding?
It is a semiquincentennial. Yes, that's it, folks.
Semiquincentennial. That's just ridiculous.
This is why we
That's
say
why they call it
250th.
America 250.
Yeah, we just call it
Exactly.
250. America's 250. Well,
You know, we go with those Roman numerals and all that kind of stuff. It just it doesn't work anymore.
like the Super Bowl, yeah, it gets out of control.
Right.
Well, we're having a series of conversations with Dr. Spalding from his incredibly patriotic and learned perspective about this 250th as this year goes on as part of our celebration and partnership with Hillsdale and specifically the D.C. campus here, their Graduate School of Government and WMAL. And so it's wintertime. We had a really bad snowstorm. Things are nasty. Things are horrible around here. 250 years ago, I know Valley Forge was a thing, but that was after the Declaration of Independence.
Right.
Were there any weather considerations that sort of factored into the Continental Congress and all that stuff?
Oh, of course there were. You know, the one thing that this last week I've been thinking about is right around now actually is the 250th anniversary of a particular event, which was, if you remember, like a lot of the actual the main activities leading up to the right before the Declaration, right? By 1775, George Washington is already a general. He sent this guy named Henry Knox, who was like a bookseller in Boston, this guy who read books and stuff.
Uh-huh.
He's his head of artillery. He sends him up to Fort Ticonderoga. If you know, that's up in New York.
That's where we get our pencils now, if I remember right.
right, for the but there's a fort up there, and they had captured it a year before, and there's a bunch of cannon. Well, Washington is in Boston and has no cannon to fight the British. He sends Henry Knox and a bunch of guys up to New York in the dead of winter, 250 years ago right now. It was snowing, terrible weather, and they brought back, you ready for this, Larry? This is your challenge. You talk about your challenge and your bells.
With my little kettlebell, yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay, here's what Henry Knox and his guys did. They brought back from Fort Ticonderoga in northern New York down to Boston, about 600 miles or so, 60 tons of cannons.
Jeez.
And they did it with mules and sleds.
Amazing. Well, you gotta. Okay, I know it sounds impressive.
So your
it sounds
challenge
impressive.
That's come on.
The snow probably helped in that regard, right? It was probably easier to get things that heavy.
It did make it a little bit easier, but they also lost snows to the ice into the rivers, and they had to recover them from under the water.
Well, yeah, I'm looking at the map now. Dr. Spalding, Fort Ticonderoga is closer to Montreal than it is to New York City, so that is incredible.
Now, I just remind you of these amazing events and sacrifices that happened. You know, we study this history, and we think, oh, yeah, we had this little dispute with the English, and all of a sudden, boom, there's a Declaration of Independence. This little thing called a war, and boom, there's the Constitution. And that's essentially all there is to it. But yet there's all sorts of things going on, really interesting dynamic history, fascinating history for, you imagine all these young people and kids and people like us that have forgotten these things because we're getting old. It's a great story.
Yeah.
It's a great story. It's not boring. This is not guys in little, tri-cornered hats and wearing wigs. They're out there fighting a war. This is real stuff.
They were manly men. Yeah, Bethany, go ahead. And I should remind you, though, Dr. Spalding is our partner and friend here on this excursion into America's 250, so don't grill him like you usually do our guests with your horrible cross-examination techniques.
I have a question for you, Dr. Spalding. So I'm actually, as it happens, it's a parenting question, actually. I am homeschooling my children, and we're reading Winter at Valley Forge right now.
Right.
And I have been on the fence. Do I bring my children to Valley Forge like next week and give them the experience of winter at Valley Forge, and maybe like make them take their shoes off and walk around in rags on their feet.
Infect them with smallpox. Yeah.
Yes.
The whole thing.
And typhus.
Yeah, cause them to use a few toes, lose a few toes.
Yeah. So how authentic do I really need to go in my homeschool education of Valley Forge, or should I wait until like a wimpy time like June?
That's always a hard call. I mean, the problem is you go up there in the middle of winter, there's not much to see, but it does give you the feel. It's like going to Gettysburg in the middle of July, right? These things matter. I mean, look, especially with young kids, first of all, I commend you for taking them to the actual place. We forget how much effect there is on young people when they actually see something. Yeah. Reading in books is great stories, but when you go there, you go to a fort, you go to a ruin, you go to some place where they actually did something. It makes a huge difference. So just going there is what's important.
So on that note, can I ask you about the Freedom Trucks?
Yeah, in fact, hold that thought. We are going to get into the Freedom Trucks, so you don't actually necessarily have to drive to these locations because the Freedom Trucks are making their way around the country. Also, I have a question for Dr. Spalding about a new initiative from the Trump administration that is sort of reorienting the perspective on some of these historic sites from the sort of wokey perspective we've seen up until now. So we'll get into all of that with Dr. Matthew Spalding of Hillsdale College just a moment.
WMAL, making sense of the news.
All right, Bethany Mandel, go ahead, because not everybody lives in this part of the country where we're sort of close to the battlefields and the historic locations for the Revolution. But we've got these mobile trucks. Have you been reading about these, Bethany?
Yes. I could not tell you how excited. Everyone should pull their kids out of school in this next year and just homeschool. America 250, just follow these trucks around. So, Dr. Spalding, I want you to tell us all about these trucks and then also just like all about all the fun things that we can do, especially here in the D.C. area, to celebrate America 250.
Yeah. Well, part of it is you struck on something that's very important. I grew up in California. And in California, you had the international, the highway system, you had the missions, you had the gold rush, but nothing really about the American Revolution. And I was in middle school during the bicentennial, and I remember the Freedom Train coming through. And so there's I'm an advisor and helping them out with the White House Task Force on America 250, and they've created an organization to support that called Freedom 250. And one of the ideas was to create these trucks, not trains that going over the train tracks, though, but trucks that could go anywhere, NASCAR races, rodeos, schools. And so imagine a massive semi-truck that expands to 3 times its size by, kind of expanding outward. And it's a mobile museum. And so cool. They came to me, and I worked with them, so I wrote the narrative and the history in it. Prager University did a lot of the walls and a lot of the videos and kind of helped create the innards. And then there's this company in North Carolina called Spevco that they make these trucks like for Coca-Cola and NASCAR and big conventions and things. And so they're going to make 6 of these trucks for Freedom 250 with this mobile museum about the American Revolution, the Declaration, the Constitution, the war. And they're going to be driving all over the country. The first one came out last week, and now they're going to be rolling them all out. And come February, they're going to be all over the country, stopping at everywhere, hopefully everywhere possible as quickly as possible, and get as many people through them as possible.
Phenomenal.
Because you're right, most people don't live near a battlefield or Philadelphia or something like that. That's the problem.
Is there a website where people can sort of track where they're going to be and sort of schedule out their time?
There is there's a freedom250.org, and there'll be a calendar there and a schedule, and you can see where they're going.
Excellent.
And go to that. Because I agree. You got to take them somewhere, especially these kids, in classes, in your homeschooling group or your co-op, whatever it might be. Teachers, take your whole class there. They're going to be reading materials that we're going to provide. There's, it's going to be an experience that one can go to.
Well, I love that America 250 has tapped you, Dr. Spalding of Hillsdale College, to be able to sort of write that and do the whole narration and such. By the way, Secretary Sean Duffy of the Department of Transportation is one of the leading forces behind the mobile museum tour there with these Freedom trucks. So that's very cool. And while I've got you, I'm seeing these headlines about how Trump is whitewashing history, Dr. Spalding. And removing, a case in point, the National Park Service has now reoriented an exhibit in Philadelphia where they have this giant exhibit in Philadelphia. Think about all the things that go on in Philadelphia and the fact that when he was president in his second term, President George Washington lived there. And when he lived there, there were 8 enslaved Africans who lived there with him who had come up from Mount Vernon. And so the entire exhibit, of course, is about Washington's slaves. And so the headlines say Trump is whitewashing history. It seems to me, and you tell me, Dr. Spalding, instead he's sort of reorienting and swinging the pendulum back, because ever since the 1619 Project, I can't go to a historic location without it seeming like the only dominant story that one is to focus on is slavery.
Is the bad? No, look. This is an especially egregious case. I've been there. It's near Philadelphia Hall on the mall there behind where the Liberty Bell is. There used to be a house there. The house is gone. There's kind of a structure and an archaeological site. And they've turned it into a focus on Washington's slavery and Washington's cruelty and the terribleness and the barbaric nature of this in the particular case of America's founder. Now, slavery is barbaric. That's not the question here. But what they've done is they've taken a very interesting historical society. Look, when Philadelphia was occupied, the British general lived there. When the Americans went back in, Benedict Arnold lived there. Yeah. Morris, who was a financier of the Revolution, he bought it and lived there. He let Washington live there during the convention. Washington was there as president. Adams was there. Now, that's an interesting place. Mm-hmm. And yet all only exclusively about slavery. So it was way out of balance. It was an egregious example of this. And the problem is you can't tell history from one extreme to the other extreme. You can't ignore the warts of history. I like to teach it warts and all. But you also can't turn it into this evil story of this dark story that America's systemically racist. You need a balance. So I think this is a rebalancing going on. The problem is it's getting caught up in politics, but that was just an egregious example that was intentionally done right near Philadelphia, Independence Hall, right near the Liberty Bell, turning it into America's evil about systemic racism. Yeah. That was the badness of it. This is why we need to get out there with good history that people want to hear. They want to hear the stories. They want to hear a balanced, the correct story, the real history, what actually happened. They don't want it interpreted according to the latest academic views about race and systemic evilness of the American founding.
Well, it's also why, if anyone here listening is interested, or if they know someone who's interested in getting an advanced degree, a part-time MA in government for young professionals, you want to talk to Hillsdale College. You want to talk to specifically the Van Andel Graduate School of Government right here, a stone's throw away from the nation's from the Capitol building. In fact, I know I've thrown a stone at the Capitol building while standing in front of it. I got arrested, but I did. It is a stone's throw. And Dr. Matthew Spalding not only runs things over there, but he's going to be our frequent partner here talking about this astounding year that we're in the middle of in 2026. Dr. Spalding, always great to talk with you, my friend. Thank you so much, sir.
Great to talk with you.